Greetings gamers, my name is Anto, and over the last week I've been reading the newest Pathfinder 2nd edition book, The Lost Omens Impossible Lands, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about it, but mainly I want to talk to you about what I'm growing to love about the Golarion setting, the Pathfinder official setting. The Impossible Lands is the latest book in Pathfinder's Lost Omens series. This is their series of setting books that explore their official setting of Golarion. Now, I've heard for a long time that people really like Golarion and think it's a really cool pre-made setting, but as someone that doesn't run pre-made settings, it's never been something that I've been particularly interested in. That changed with Pathfinder 2nd edition, particularly with the Mwangi Expanse. This book really interested me when it was first announced, so I picked it up really before I ever planned on getting into Pathfinder 2nd edition, so I could read through it, get inspired by the content in it. And since then, I've gone on to actually pick up quite a few of the Lost Omens books. Picked up the Lost Omens World Guide, I have the Mwangi Expanse, I picked up the Knights of Lastwall. The Lost Omens Travel Guide is one of my favourite books from this year. I made a video on that up here. So I was quite excited to dive into this new entry in the Impossible Lands. Now, the Impossible Lands is the name of a region within the world of Golarion. It makes up a few different nations. There is the nation of Nex, which is really high magic focused, lots of sorcerers, very high magical energy. There's the nation of Geb, which is just all undead, and it's awesome. There are the mana wastes that separate these two warring nations, this battle-scarred, magically infused wasteland that's full of really cool stuff, including a whole city of like clockwork gunslingers. And then there's some smaller islands off the coast in Bopan and Jalmaray. I think that's how you pronounce both of those. Now, the Impossible Lands book itself is really interesting. If you are someone that is running a game in the Golarion setting in the Inner Sea, then you're going to want to pick up this book. There's a bunch of information on all of the nations there, but more than that, I really appreciated the structure that it takes when looking at these regions and showing you what life is like there. So pretty much all of these regions, they give you an overview. So with Geb, for example, it gives you an overview of, oh, this is the land of the undead. You know, mindless undead work the fields so that they can sell off the food to other nations. There are numerous undead that have more rights than the living, who they call the quick. And it goes into all of the kind of politics of the dead, undead, living relationships between these different types of people in the region. But then you also get a much more slice of life look at each region. Every region in the book includes a day in and a year in each of these regions. It tells you what a typical day will look like in each of these areas. Now, this will cover what do people typically do. It will cover, you know, the common traditions that people have. So for example, in the Clockwork City of Alkenstar, time is broken up into Bronze Time and Surge Time. This city is based in the Mana Wastes and is kind of surrounded by incredibly powerful surges of magical energy. During Bronze Time, these surges are more stable and certain things can be done, whereas during Surge Time, there's more magic everywhere and there's more of a magical focus, and the way people approach the day is different. But then you also get a year in the life in each of these regions, which tells you about seasonal changes, holidays and traditions, and what it might look like to someone living in this region over the course of a year. And this is an approach that Pathfinder has been taking in a lot of their books. It was included in the Lost Omens Travel Guide. It gave you some information on urban versus rural living, and it's really useful for getting a sense of how the common people in these regions live. As a dungeon master, it's really useful for giving you a whole bunch of really small textural information that you can use to make the world feel more alive for your players. With this kind of information, I would be completely comfortable running some homebrew games in these regions. I feel like there is enough information there for me as a homebrew DM to take this information, make it my own, but also have plenty of touch points for how the region actually behaves and how people interact with it and how the world sees each of these regions. The Impossible Lands is super diverse. There's an incredible amount of ancestries available to you within this region. So no matter what ancestry you're interested in playing, people probably aren't going to look at you that strange if you're playing in the Impossible Lands. Now, I don't want to go into too many specifics because a lot of this book is lore and story style information, so I don't want to be huge in terms of spoilers, but reading through The Impossible Lands really cemented one of my favorite things about Pathfinder in general, and that is the expression of a high magical world. Now, I often see conversations about, what is D&D 5th edition's genre? What is the intent for the kind of game that you wanted to play? And a lot of people will say, a high magic world, but I don't see that expressed in the lore nearly enough. Whereas in Pathfinder 2nd edition and in the Lost Omen books that I have been reading through, there are amazing feats of magic all throughout the world. The entire world is so infused with magic, you really believe that this is a world where magic exists and where it is prevalent. So my favorite example from this book is the relationship between the nations of Nex and Geb. They are at war, and they spent like 1,000 years at war, and both of them are led by incredibly powerful spellcasters in Kings Nex and Geb respectively, and that kind of conflict of magic irradiated a band of the land between the two nations, creating the Mana Wastes, which is this stretch of land where magic is wild and unpredictable as a result of the sheer bonkers amount of spellcasting and magic and kind of magical duels going on between these two nations and these two incredibly powerful spellcasters. Elsewhere in the Impossible Lands, you have an entire field of stone soldiers where King Geb, with a single spell, turned an entire army to stone, and now they stand in the fields and periodically move like living statues from time to time. It's just everywhere you go in this setting, you can feel the presence of magic. Now, if you're someone that prefers a lower amount of magic, some classic sword and sorcery where magic is nebulous and rare, this probably isn't the setting for you. But if you want to run a setting where magic is just everywhere and you feel its impact on every aspect of the world, Golarion and Pathfinder 2nd edition is probably the system for you. Keeping on that expression of high magical power theme, because that's really my takeaway from this book, along with all of the other Lost Omens books that I've read, there's just so much cool high magic stuff going on in this world. Now, my favorite overall piece of high magic lore from this setting isn't actually from this book. It's referenced, I believe, in the Knights of Last book, but there is a great necromancer called Tarbathon, I believe, Tarbathon. And they use the wish spell to try and rip someone's heart out of their chest, which is just such a power move. It's so cool. And we get some cool moments like that in this book, in the Impossible Lands. There is a reference that a group of knights tried to attack Geb, and so King Geb kills the knights, reanimates them as grave knights, and then sends them back to steal the corpse of like their martyred saint kind of figure, bring it back to him so he can animate her into a lich and have her serve as his queen. Like, that's the kind of high-level sorcery shenanigans that I love to see in a high magic setting. In terms of new mechanical stuff in the book, there are 5 new ancestries. There's the Goron, who are a tree-like people, the Kashrishi, who are little rhino-type folk, the Nagaji, who are serpentine-like Yuan-Ti style peoples, the Vanara, who are a race of like ape folk, and the Vishkanya, who are like a venom-blooded humanoid. Then throughout the book, you get some history on the Impossible Lands, and then it goes into detail on a bunch of the different areas. You get Alkenstar, which is the mechanical clockwork gunslinger city. You get Geb, the undead nation. You get Bopan, which is the beastkin area. You got Jalmarai, which is one of the large islands off the coast of the Impossible Lands. You get the Mana Wastes, which is that irradiated band. And then you get Nex, which is the kind of kingdom of high magic and wizards, and there's all kinds of magical craziness going on there. Each of these sections has new mechanical elements. So for Alkenstar, for example, there is a new gunslinger way for like a gunblade gunslinger. And there are things like curses and new hazards sprinkled throughout the book. But really, this is a book that you pick up primarily for the setting stuff. Most of the mechanical information, most of the class and character stuff, that's going to be available on places like Nethys. So if you're only interested in playing the Way of the Gunblade Gunslinger or the Venaran Ape people, you might not be super interested in getting this book, but I do think it is worth it, even if you're a homebrew DM, to pick up some of these Lost Omens books, because they are full of really interesting little tidbits. Every page that I read in this book gave me some kind of idea for something that I could do in my own homebrew world, or for ways in which I could incorporate things I already had in a more interesting and kind of more deeply ingrained way. If you have read any of the Impossible Lands books or are running a game in the Golarion setting, tell me about it in the comments below. What is your favorite part of this setting? What makes it special for you? But if you want to keep watching, check out my video comparing the monsters in Pathfinder and 5th edition. But until next time, happy gaming.